Hello and welcome to Better Than Art School. This is a mini lecture on abstraction, specifically formal abstraction, and especially using landscape to explore this kind of abstraction. Alright, so this is a painting by Cezanne. He painted this mountain many, many times. He passed on his way to work and he just started doing iterations of paintings on the same theme. And you might notice the subject matter first. You might say, oh, that's a mountain, these are houses and trees. You might notice the brush strokes first. You might notice the colors first. One thing that I tend to notice about this painting is that the blues up here on the top move all the way through this part, and the oranges and the greens move up through the sky. Okay, so that's something that I notice as a painter. But basically, this painting has a formal idea to it. It's not just a photographic interpretation, realistic interpretation of something. Alright, so here's that's a first little clue. Here's a second clue. This is Mirandi, and in this one he's painting these vessels that you can kind of recognize. Like if you saw the same vessel in a room, you'd know which one, the same picture or whatever. So it takes skill to do that. It takes skill to represent something with some fidelity to it, and getting all the ellipses right and all those kind of things. But this is the same artist, very similar subject matter, similar composition. This time, he's not worried so much about the depiction of the objects, especially the specificity, the realism of the objects. And so that frees him up to be more exploratory about the color and the shape. Okay? And so in this way, this picture here is more formally abstract than this picture here. Alright, so this is the most basic breakdown in art, and I've hit on this before in other mini lectures, but content is whatever you're trying to say, form is the form it takes. It's how you say it. Okay, that's basically it. So you need both to have art. You need some idea of something you're trying to get across. It might be very abstract. It might be a biblical story. It might be a philosophical idea. It could be anything. And then the form is the tools you use. Do you do a poem? Do you make a movie about it? Do you what kind of way do you express it? And then what tools you use? And once you get there, say you decide for a painting that you're going to settle on a painting of this idea. Well, what's the style of the painting? What are the colors that you choose? What's the palette of the painting? Those are all formal issues. Art education today is almost wholly concentrated on formal rather than content ideas. Most art instructors do not tell you what to say besides like a specific assignment. They tell you how to say it better, how to communicate your content better. Alright, so just to make this a little simpler, because that was a lot to read, content is what you're trying to say or represent. Form is the visual way you express your content. It's the visual way you express your ideas. So then when we're talking about formal elements, we're talking about elements of the artwork or design pertaining to the form. Okay, not pertaining to the content, pertaining to the form. Okay, and formal elements, when we're talking about that in 2D art, what we're talking about are things that you can abstract out from any specific subject matter. So it's things like line, shape, value, texture, color, space. These are all things that you can imagine instantiated in a particular object. You can imagine a red Porsche. But you don't need the Porsche. You could just have red. Right? So you don't need a Porsche to imagine red. Just like you don't need a fur coat to imagine texture, or you don't need a specific light situation to understand value. You can imagine all of these in an abstract way, and so that's when you know you're dealing with something that's formal. All right, so this is another clue here, and I've shown this also before because it's so stark, but this is the same exact content. It's the story of Icarus flying away from the Minotaur, and that story about his father Daedalus that you can see up here. He told Icarus, don't fly too close to the sun because the wax will get melted and your wings will fall apart and you'll die. And he had hubris, he flew too close to the sun, that kind of thing. These are depicting that same story. This one is more naturalistic in a way. It feels more like a realistic depiction that, you know, a reporter would get if he or she went and took pictures of this event happening. And this one's just more iconic. Okay, it's just cut out paper by Matisse. It's the same story, So this shows you how different form can be talking about the same content. All right, so then what are formalists? Well, you might imagine it has something to do with the form again, obviously, because form is in the word formalist. So this painter, Fairfield Porter, is more interested in the formal aspects of the art than the realism of the art. So in this painting, it's willing to be more about the shapes and the color. These are like flat color shapes you wouldn't normally see, than the naturalism or the realism of the scene. Okay, so this is Jackson Pollock, a very famous abstract artist. I think when people think abstract, they think they have to go completely all the way to a full departure from reality. And that's not really the case. Really, abstract, it means something, you depart from something, and there's a continuum here. You can go from slight abstraction. Almost all art is arguably some kind of slight abstraction from reality, because it's not the real thing. Even our very realistic pictures is paint moved around to look like something. Partial, that's more like losing more and more signs of depiction, and then all the way to complete departure, which this is. Okay, so, but you don't have to go all the way to abstract something. So in art history, there's some pictures that stand out as being kind of turning points where art became more interested in abstraction. This is a famous James McNeill Whistler. And then some art historians said, well, actually, this painting happened about 1872. And some art historians said, well, actually, in Chinese art, there's been this kind of drippity painting and more abstract painting going all the way back to the 12th century. And but the thing is in art, you can't really get a full gotcha moment, because this is abstract art from the cave painting, so, over 30,000 years ago. So abstract art is as old as art. Some of the earliest art in the world is abstract. All right, so these are kind of abstracted landscapes. This one is interesting because if you cut it off, if you crop it here, it would just look like a Jackson Pollock, or it just look like a wallpaper or something like that. But then you put this in, here's a figure down here, here's some trunks of trees, here's some bushes, and suddenly it becomes a landscape. This is a landscape, an abstracted landscape painting that I did, where I was more interested in, it was all done with a palette knife, and I was just interested in scraping out these colors and getting kind of a color movement. And the composition of the landscape just kind of became just something to set a composition for me to explore these colors and strokes. All right, so an easy way to abstract is just to crop something. So the more severely you crop something, the less easily recognizable it is, and the more abstract it becomes. So you can take any painting, another painting by Cezanne, and then if you crop it, and we look here, it takes a little bit to understand what's happening here. So this is abstracted just by sheerly the virtue of cropping it in a certain way. All right, so this is from Scott McCloud, and he kind of figured out this idea of the pyramid of representation. And this is to me the best way to understand art, as art as representation. Okay, so if we start out on the far left, it's a specific person, specific time and place, specific lighting. That's about as representational as it gets. A photograph of a specific person at a specific time in their life, specific light, blah, blah, blah. And then as you move along the bottom of the pyramid, it's becoming more and more iconic. If you keep going, you get to the word face. You get to pure meaning. So you move from resemblance to meaning. And most languages before the alphabet were pictograms. It was like a picture of a bull was the word for bull, and on and on. So this is kind of an old idea in art. So on the bottom of the pyramid, we're moving from resemblance to meaning, and then at the top of the pyramid, it's called the picture plane. Now the picture plane, in one way, it's just you're painting on a canvas. That canvas is your picture plane, that rectangle. But the picture plane can be any shape that you're working within the confines of. And that shape is a geometric shape. So when you're moving towards the picture plane, you're moving towards pure abstraction. Remember, abstraction is a continuum, so you don't have to fully abstract something for it to be abstract. And you might even say this is abstract in a way because nobody's really going to hold a smile for that long. So that's already abstract. But as it breaks down more and more and becomes less and less recognizable, it's becoming more and more moving towards the picture plane in this case. Okay, so if you take a painting like The Girl with the Pearl Earring by Vermeer, that's going to be more down in this corner. If you take purely abstract art like Mondrian, it's going to be up in the top. And then you can kind of chart different works of art throughout this pyramid. And this is a painting by Flint, is his name? Alfred Russel Flint. And where would this painting go? Well, it's pretty realistic, so I think it would go, it would go down here somewhere, right? I would put it down in here. This is by Keith Haring. This one's very iconic, so it's got some meaning, but it's also very abstract with shapes and formal abstraction. So I'd put it probably somewhere in there, personally. And then our old friends, the pictures of the Icarus story. So this one I would put between meaning and picture plane somewhere. This one I'd put between, I put more between resemblance and meaning, but closer to resemblance. Picasso, this painting is pretty much right smack in the middle. This is the Guernica painting, very famous painting. It's got abstraction, it's got meaning, it's got some realistic depiction, well, not realistic, but recognizable depictions of things. I'd put it pretty much right smack in the middle. And then there's the hard cases like furniture. What do you do with utilitarian art? Is it still, can you still put it in here somewhere? Or something like a wallpaper that's not really a composition because where you crop it doesn't really matter. It just goes on forever. Where do you put those things? Maybe you could say they fall outside of the pyramid, or maybe you could say you could make a special case for including them. But I bring them up because they're kind of the interesting hard case. Okay, so with landscape, if it's realistic, if we can parse the space, if we can understand the space pretty well, even if it's not super realistic, we can put it in here somewhere. And then more formal kind of abstract landscape, it's moving towards the picture plane. So this one I'd probably put over here somewhere, maybe up here. All right, there's a puppy waving you goodbye. I'll see you next time.